Kiss.
Smith, also known as Akins, also known as the coolest guy in sports, back with another Who's Better. This time I have Paul George versus Victor Oladipo on the menu. Paul George played 79 games this past season, 36.6 minutes per game, 21.9 points per game, 43% from the field, 40% from the three-point line, 5.7 rebounds per game, 3.3 assists per game, 0.5 blocks per game, 2 steals per game. Victor Oladipo played 75 games this past season, 34 minutes per game, 23.1 points per game, 47.7% from the field, 37.1% from the three-point line, 5.2 rebounds per game, 4.3 assists per game, 0.8 blocks per game, 2.4 steals per game, 79.9% from the free throw line. That being said, who is better between the two, Victor Oladipo or Paul George? Now, Depot, he killed this past season and made everybody stop saying the Pacers got washed in the deal with him and Paul George. Depot turned into a monster. This past season, he helped the Pacers get into the playoffs. Depot showed a lot of growth. This year, he went from a slasher to a go-to scorer. In Orlando, he had moments like this past season, but this season, he put it all together. In Orlando, he wasn't really consistent. And, of course, he wasn't shooting the way he is now. But Depot improved and worked on his game, so give that man a lot of credit. Victor Oladipo won the Most Improved award this past season. He averaged career highs in points, rebounds, assists, and field goal percentage, and he led the league in steals with 2.4 steals per game. Only 2 players averaged 20 points per game and 2 steals this past season. It was Oladipo and the guy they traded him for, Paul George. But that being said, Depot is not better than Paul George. He had better numbers this past season. Yes, he did. But Paul George was the second option, and their numbers were still very similar. Depot had a higher usage rating and was the number 1 option, and Paul George is now a co-star with Russell Westbrook and a second option. And he also was battling with Carmelo Anthony because he had to really share the ball with 2 other superstars. Depot is becoming a star. Paul George is already a star, and some nights he's even a superstar. But for as great as Depot was this past season, I mean, nobody saw this type of improvement or rise or elevation, whatever you want to call it, coming from Victor Oladipo. I mean, people was laughing at this trade, but Depot showed and proved what he's capable of doing when he's the number 1 option and possibly becoming. He may become a superstar. Who knows? Only time will tell. But Paul George is still the better player. He can play and defend more positions. Also a better half-court player because he can get his shot off at any time. Also more versatile defender and better shooter than Depot. Paul George was the best player on the Pacers leading them to the Eastern Conference Finals. The only reason why those teams didn't reach the finals was because, of course, the great LeBron James. People tend to forget how great Paul George and the Pacers was when they were facing Miami Heat. They were their biggest competition. Paul George, who got the name Playoff P or Playoff Paul George, whatever you want to call it, because he elevates his game during the playoffs. We saw him go crazy against the Heat. We saw him go crazy all those years with the Indiana Pacers. Even though the Pacers had a great all-around, great fundamental team when Paul George was playing with the Pacers, Paul George was still an animal, was still the alpha dog, was still the beast. And I know you remember the time when LeBron James even gave him a high five during the game because Paul George was going crazy and he dropped 44 on the Miami Heat. If it wasn't for that crazy injury with the USA team, who knows what Paul George could have been. I mean, he came back from the injury and still is great, but he was entering the prime of his career when that injury happened, and it was a setback. He even plays different compared to the way he used to play before. He's more of a jump shooter now. Before, he was a slasher. And still a jump shooter, but he used to elevate above the rim, attack the rim more. He doesn't do that as much. Depot is great, but are we really going to take a guy who just won his first Most Improved Player Award over a perennial All-Star? In all reality, Depot doesn't become the player he is now without the experience of playing with Russell Westbrook. He saw what he needed to do to become the player he is today. He never would have gotten that experience in Orlando. He never would have transformed into what he is now without playing with Russell Westbrook. So it baffles me sometimes how people say it's because he left Russ, and everyone who leaves Russ plays better. Those are false arguments, false narratives. But Depot balled this past season. I'm eager to see what he does this year and the next 5 years. But saying he's better than Paul George, yeah, that's a no-no for right now. But this is your boy, Mike K. Smith, also known as A-Kiss, also known as the coolest guy in sports. Who you guys rolling with, Paul George or Victor Oladipo? I'm taking Paul George. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell because I bring you daily NBA content and in-depth player analysis on the daily. Also, check out some of the links below. I got my podcast, I also got my sports Instagram, and I got my Twitter as well. I'm gone, man. Peace.